Hello, Michael here again with another tutorial about doing water. Recently someone was asking me some questions about the AAOcean shader and deformer for Maya and Renderman, and they were having some issues with it, and I was wondering if there was a slightly easier way to sort of do oceans and water and stuff with Renderman or any other renderer for that matter. And I came across the hotOcean shader, hotOceanDeformer, which was initially a plugin for Houdini, but someone ported it over to Maya very nicely. So there's a link in the description on where to download it. I'm just going to quickly run you through the install, and then I'll jump into Maya and show you how you can get started on rendering out yourself some nice water. So once you've downloaded it, you'll get this hotOcean_Maya. If you extract that, if you go right click, if you've got 7-zip, you can just extract files here, and you'll get this release folder. You want to go into deformer, and then your version of Maya. Mine was 2016 and Win64, and the .mll will be in there, and that MLL, because I've already extracted it, is called hotOceanDeformer.mll. So you can copy that out and paste it somewhere easy to find for now, but what we're going to do is we're actually going to create, we're going to make sure our Maya environment variables know where to look for this plugin. So if you go to your Maya folder, which is normally in your documents by default on Windows, and you go to 2016, you'll have this Maya.env. If you right click on that and open with Notepad, I have Notepad++, which is free also. If you search and download that, that's quite useful. You'll get something that looks a bit like this. It may not have anything in it, might be completely empty. If it is empty, you want to create these two lines here. So when you open up your envir.env editor with Notepad, you'll get something that looks like this, or it might be empty. So what you can do is we're going to create some folders. It can be anywhere on your computer, but for just this example, I've just created them in my C directory. So if you go to C and you right click and you go new folder, you can just type in Maya plugins, for example, and then we'll go back to Maya. We'll go back to this rather, and then we can just point Maya to that folder by typing in C:/Maya plugins. Alternatively, you could go to the folder that you just created, open it up, and then right click on your top bar there and go copy address as text. Go back here, and if you just say it had nothing there, for example, just hit Control-V and it'll paste it in. And it's going to use / in Windows, I think it's / in OS X, so just keep that in mind. And you can do the same for a script path as well. We're not going to be using a script path, but it's handy to have it there if you don't already, for other plugins, if you're installing other plugins in the future. But yeah, this is not actually what Maya.env looks like. Mine's kind of more jacked up than that because I've got a lot of other things installed, so I didn't want to confuse the issue. So yeah, so we're going to save that, and then now Maya will be able to find our plugin. So if you grab your .mll file, which is this hotOceanDeformer, if you just copy or cut and go to your Maya plugins folder and paste it in, Maya will now be able to find it. Okay, so once you've opened up Maya, we're going to have to enable the plugins. So you want to go to Windows, Settings and Preferences, Plugin Manager, and it should be up the top there, or have the path to wherever your plugin was installed, and where you pointed the .env, and you'll see hotOceanDeformer.mll. You can choose to auto-load it if you want it to load every time Maya boots, or just click loaded, and then that will enable it so you can create ocean deformers. So that's installed. Let's go about creating a body of water. So the first thing I'm going to do is save this scene as hot whoops, hotOcean tutorial, which is always handy to do. And then we're going to create a polygon plane. This plane is just 10 by 10 by default. And yeah, as you can see, those are the default settings. So we want to apply the hotOceanDeformer to it. And we do this by running a really quick script. So if you clicked this here, you'll get the Mel script editor. And the script is, if you type in deformer space dash type space hotOceanDeformer semicolon, and then make sure you've got your plane selected, and click play, and I'll run the script, and you can close that. And you'll see that we've got a little bit of deformation happening already. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to grab the X and the Z scale, and I'm just going to increase them by 10. And just in case you didn't know, you can click on the first one, hold down Control, and click on the second one. Then you just type 10, and it'll change both of them. And then I'm going to get rid of the grid because that doesn't help anyone. And if I click play, you'll see that already we've got some deformation happening. And it's updating live in the viewport, which is super useful. If I select that, and if I just go to the node editor, you can sort of see what's happening a bit more. So we've got this hotOceanDeformer here, which has got a bunch of parameters on it. You could edit it with the by selecting it here or going to the channel box editor. It's easier just to click it and then go to inputs and go to hotOceanDeformer. That'll make things just a bit simpler. And what we're going to do is set this up so we've got a nice little body of water. Just as an example, I'll just give you some example parameters to work with. The first thing that we want to do is we want to increase the subdivisions of the plane, and we base that on the resolution of the deformer. The deformer is resolution set to 6, so this is sort of like the detail. You can sort of think of it as. So the best way to do that is if you go to where is it? Polyplane, and we want to use the resolution as our power. So we want to increase our subdivisions to the power of whatever our resolution scale is. So if we go to the subdivision width and we go 2 to the power of 6, and 6 was our resolution, that's 64. So if the width subdivisions by 64 and the height subdivision by 64, we get something that looks like that. I don't have smooth shading on because it will make it a bit too chunky to render in the viewport, but you can see that we get a slightly better detail there without having to change too much. And now we can start visualizing this. So the first thing we want to look at is the size. The size is basically the area squared in which we're working with. So if you imagine this is 64 meters by 64 meters, because that was the resolution power that we used, we could do something like that, and that would give us a slightly more realistic look already. But we can still make that look a little bit better. So the wind speed is something you can work with to get a little bit more detail or smooth out your waves. So if you increase it, so let's increase it to 30, it's going to make our waves a lot smoother. Increase it even more. But it's not going to increase the speed in which the waves are moving at. But if we decrease it, say to 10, you'll see that it's a little bit jagged or more jagged already. Okay, and wave height. So this is going to be roughly the maximum height of your wave based on your grid. So we could say make that 10, and it's going to make things look crazy. So let's start with something like 5 1.5. It might be a bit big. Yeah, 1.5 is cool. The shortest wave, if you make your shortest wave close to your wave height, let's make it 1 for example, it's going to really mellow out the look of your waves overall and make everything a lot calmer and smoother. It's because it's pushing the lowest point close to your highest point. So it just depends what you're after, but sort of that's what I'm just going to do for this example. The choppiness is going to increase the sharpness of the peaks. So if we say, and to exaggerate this, I'm going to slow the wind speed down to like 5, and then the choppiness I'm going to make 1.5, go up 2. Yeah, so you can see those peaks are sort of starting to pinch there. And you need to be a little bit careful with this, because what can happen is you can see that you're getting some black spots where it's like tearing. And it doesn't look very good on the render. So what you want to do is just keep adjusting the choppiness until you get rid of those points where the waves appear to be tearing at the tips. I think that's pretty good, so let's keep that for now. Damp reflection, basically this controls whether or not any of the waves are going to be going in the opposite direction of the wind. So let's talk about wind. Wind is just basically a 360 degree measure. So it's going, it's starting from the positive of the X and then going like, you know, say if we changed it to 90, the wind would be coming from the right, as you can see. But because we've got this damp reflection, I'm going to just change that to 1, which means completely on. Sorry, the wind will be coming from the left, not the right, moving towards the right. So you can see that all the waves are moving from left to right. And that's because with damp reflections on, it means that the waves won't be pushing against the wind. So if you change it to 0.5, you can see you get some movement in the opposite direction. If you're trying to create something like in a smaller body of water, if you set that to 0, you get something that looks a lot more turbulent. And you can make it look like boiling water in a pan or something like that if you sort of start messing with your wind speed and things like that. So if I set the wind speed to 2 and the choppiness to 1, maybe 0.7, shortest way to, yeah. So you start to get something that looks like boiling water, and that sort of, you can make that look more like boiling water based on the speed. And you can control sort of the speed of the water by using the ocean depth parameter. So if I set that to 1, so if I set that to 0.1, you see the waves are moving a lot slower. Whereas if I increase that number, say to 500, it starts to get a lot faster. So you can sort of think of it that way. And the default is 200, so I'm just going to set it back to that. So wind align increases the strength of the wind direction. So if you want, so for example, your waves look like this at the moment. If you want it to look more like a surf beach, for example, if we increased it by 100, you see you get this really uniform sort of sets of waves coming through. And that's because, like, you can imagine, like the wind direction's a lot, it's coming from like a wider angle, so it's controlling the waves more uniformly. Whereas if you set it to a lower number, you start to get something a little bit more varied. The seed is where the waves are generated from. So even if you were using all these same parameters as someone else, but you change the seed to 5, for example, you'll get a slightly different version of that. It will still be controlled by the same parameters, but imagine like if it was the same day, but you were looking at a different patch of ocean, that's sort of what it would look like. So yeah, that's pretty much all the all the parameters that you need to sort of worry about. You need to play with them a little bit to get used to how it all works. The thing you need to bear in mind that have the biggest effect on how it looks overall is the scale of the plane that you're working with. the resolution and the size. So if I increase that size to say 256, see how it's gotten a whole bunch smoother, because it's as if this is a much larger piece of ocean that it's looking at. Whereas if I made it a lot smaller, say 16, it's applying these high, by comparison, these parameters are very high based on the size, so it doesn't look very realistic. So that's why it worked well with our size of 64, because that's what we were working with in the first place. And you could also, if you think you want to normalize that a little bit, you could change it, say, to 128, and it's sort of starting to smooth it out a little bit, but it's not sort of the way I would work. Okay, so we've got some ocean. Why don't we get it rendered so it looks kind of pretty? So what we're going to do is we're going to open up the Hypershade editor, and we're going to create a, we're going to go into Renderman, RIS, go to base materials, and we're going to create a Pixar LM glass, and then we're going to select our plane, right click and assign material to selection. And then you'll see that we've got this glassy type thing happening here. I'm going to create a light, because they're always useful. And we're going to go to the attribute editor of that light, and we're going to change that to be a distant light. So this is going to have a world direction. It doesn't really matter where in the scene it is. It's just all the light's going to be coming in from whatever direction I decide this is. So I'm just going to turn that on the 45. I'm going to change the exposure to be 1.5. I'm going to keep the color white, just so when I change the color of this glass, you'll understand what the local color of the water is. And also we're going to go into polygons and create another plane, just for like a ocean floor, or whatever you want to sort of how you want to think of it. Whoops. And I also created a metal shader, not a glass shader, which is what I wanted. So let's create the LM glass correctly and apply that. It's a bit better. All right. So let's pretend this is a bit like a lagoon. So let's get a lagoonish looking color, which is going to be sort of a greeny blue, something that looks a bit like that. So our reflection color is going to be a little bit greeny blue. Our refraction color is also going to be the same, and it's going to transmit the same color through. And you'd probably want to fiddle with this a bit more than what I am, but just for the sake of this tutorial, I'm just going to do it really quick. Roughness I'm going to set to 0.2 so we can actually see the surface of the water a little bit easier. And let's just do a quick IPR to see where we are. All right, so that's not bad. Our water isn't transmitting very much light though, so I'm going to change that by enabling thin on the glass shader, and then just go to re-render that, and you'll see that we'll get a lot more light passing through, which is a bit better. And talking about light, it appears our light's coming from a bit too steeper angle, so I'm just going to, so we can see the reflections on the water a bit easier, I'm just going to make that angle a little bit more acute. Yeah, so what I'm trying to do is sort of get the light to hit the peaks a bit more. And I'm wondering maybe if I can increase the choppiness, which I actually don't remember if I mentioned, but basically the choppiness is how sharp the peaks are. I did talk about this. Change to 0.1. Yeah, that's not bad. And give that a render. All right, so that's starting to do what I wanted it to do. Now what you'll notice here is that there's no caustics, which is when the light passes through a transparent object and then sort of converges on a point to create highlights on the surface behind. We can enable that in the render settings by going to IPR sampling, or sampling if you're going to do your final render, and go allow caustics. For the sake of this tutorial, I'm not going to, because it increases the render time, and you have to render at a high resolution or high sample rate to get it to actually look decent. So yeah, we've got some lagoonish looking water. Why don't we get this to look even more realistic by creating a environment light and making it look as though it is the sky, by giving it a nice sky blue color. and this is going to hurt my render time, but let's have a look. Yeah, the sky blue is probably a little bit too green. Okay, it's a bit closer. All right, so now we've got our light, we've got our surface shader, which is looking sort of close enough for jazz. We can also do one more thing to make this look a little bit more like water would appear, which is to create some volume underneath, because it's obviously completely empty underneath. So we can do this by going to FX up the top here, go to fluids, create a 3D container, and you get something that looks like that. Just gonna move that around, increase its size, and I want the volume to sort of be just roughly cresting the lowest point of the wave, so you can sort of see it's just catching it there. And then we're going to go to our attribute editor, and we're just going to use the default settings mainly. We're going to change the density of that fluid to be a gradient, and it's going to be a Y gradient. And then we're going to go down to shading, and we're going to go to opacity, and we're going to just make it a lot less opaque because it's not that dirty of water. And then we're going to change the color to be the same color as our water, which was this first one here. You could make it darker if you wanted to make the water look a little bit more like dirty, I guess. I'm going to do that just slightly. And then it's going to hurt your render time heaps, but I'm just going to do a quick IPR and show you what that looks like. Okay, so just looking at the sort of side on, you can see that the density probably isn't high enough to look super realistic, but you're sort of getting the idea of that it's creating the illusion that there is a volume underneath the surface of that water. So when you're rendering out a shot, you can get this to look a little bit more realistic. And this is particularly nice if you've got, say, maybe a night scene, and you wanted some lights piercing through the surface of the water. They're going to illuminate the light rays through that, and you'll get a pretty cool result that way. So yeah, that's pretty much all there is to it. Unfortunately, there's no real ocean shader for Renderman as is, so you don't get like the best result without creating custom parameters and stuff like that, which I don't really want to get into because I'm not the best at creating custom shading networks and stuff. And since you can't use Slim with RIS, I don't know if there's a really good way of going about it, but you'll get some pretty nice water nonetheless. You'll just need to play with your glass shader to get a better result, and you don't necessarily also have to use a glass shader. Like you could just, I'm just going to delete that plane and that volume. You could just create Pixar Disney shader, for example, if you're just looking for something a bit more stylized. Increase the specularity, lower the roughness, and then you can get a render on that sort of, you know, it doesn't look the worst either. It actually looks pretty good. So yeah, it just depends on exactly what you're looking for. And also, before you render, it doesn't hurt to select your plane and hit 3 just to get your smooth shading. I wouldn't do that when you're just working with the water, because as you can see, it just makes it a bit too chunky to work with. But if you wanted to decrease your resolution by a power of 2 and then hit 3, you would get roughly the same sort of topology. So yeah, that's pretty much all there is to that one. This is just a quick overview. So hopefully that has been useful to you. If it has, let me know in the comments, or just click like, and then other people will also find this and it'll be super helpful for them. If you have any questions, feel free to leave a comment as well, or if you've got any suggestions, or if you've got any requests for tutorials, I'd also like to know about it as well. And if you haven't subscribed, make sure you subscribe, because I do a new tutorial every week for Renderman and other renderers and all sorts of computer design type stuff. So yeah, but otherwise, thanks for watching, everybody. I'll catch you next week. Happy rendering.